Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Dirty Windshield series with me, Meredith, your host. Today, I thought we would talk about music and more specifically, songwriting. Um, the first in, you know, I'll make it a little series, but how to go about making a song. Well, before we get inundated with music theory and what have you, which you can go out online and learn about roots and thirds and fifths and sevenths and sixths and add nine chords and yada yada yada. All music basically follows a format. I know when I was growing up as a kid in the 70s, I obviously listened to a lot of AM music when I was in the car with my mom and dad, or Saturday night they'd spin a disc or something, whether it was Simon and Garfunkel or John Denver, Neil Diamond, or whatever they were listening to. The Beatles, of course, even though my parents were a little older when that stuff hit, but they knew it, of course. I was always fascinated with music. And by the time I was 10 years old, I had a paper route, so I could afford to buy records and buy a stereo. And it was at a time when punk rock had broken through in America, as well as, the British New Wave movement. And that included, bands like The Police, Elvis Costello, Attractions, Joe Jackson, The Clash, The Jam, and also bands like Motorhead and Thin Lizzy, who had been out before, but they were sort of carried through with the punk movement. Now, I was always just absolutely fascinated with music. Like, how did they come up with this? They have a riff, and everything just kind of, then the singing parts would come in, and then back to guitars, and then singing again, and then a chorus that kept moving along. And I was just like, wow. Now, it would take years before I realized what was actually going on. I learned how to play guitar, or I was learning how to play guitar. I remember my first classes were like September of 1979 at the new high school, Seattle. And I would do that, and I would carry up this big, heavy acoustic guitar. Not that it was that heavy, but I would carry it up, and I would learn basic chords, your G's and your C's and your D's, your E minors. We'd all strum along to, the teacher like Bob Dylan, or, we'd strum along. And as the years went on, I did get an electric guitar because I loved it. I loved it so much. In 1981, the Stones brought out Tattooed You, and I remember buying that and just being like, whoa. Listening to Keith and Ronnie's guitars, like, wow. And of course, The Who, the next year with It's Hard, and the simulcast that was on from Toronto later, near Christmas there, or whatever it was. And just being blown away by how these songs were put together, and of course the Clash were big, and so it all came down to song structure. Now, that I would play chords and some scales, and I've never really progressed since those beginning days. I always feel like I sound exactly like I did if it was 1984, 85. my music is exactly the same. I've never progressed. I've never practiced to get better, you know, and become more proficient at the instrument, because I really admire these great guitarists like Robert Fripp and David Gilmour and Andy Summers, and you know, their playing is just, well, everybody's playing is way better than mine, you know. So, I mean, there's 10-year-old kids, 6-year-old kids who could shred better, you know. I was like, just pack up and, all right, I'm gone. But it was in grade 11, my music teacher, Mr. Hanna, he allowed myself and another student to, we were a little more advanced in the class because we were into guitars and we did know music theory by that point. We studied out of a book called Harmony by Walter Piston. And we would learn, you know, wow, the two of us, we would, you know, read chapters of this thing. I mean, it was so intense, this book on classical music, deconstruction. But this was in grade 11, which would be, for me, September 1985 to June of 1986, year of Expo. Anyways, it was at that point where the light bulb just, boom, it all fell into place. Chord construction, song construction, everything just fell into place. And that was at a time when I could rent Porta Studios, 4-track recorders, get my, you know, I didn't have a credit card, but mom would take me up and I would have the money and I could rent equipment from Long and McQuaid. You know, these Fostex and Tascam Porta Studios, the Yamaha Porta Studio recorder that they had. Rent a microphone and, you know, basically record the amp. And once I learned how it was done, like having it, all music basically follows the same format. It's either 8-bar, 10-bar, 12-bar blues. So if it's 8-bar blues, just to cite an example, you'd have an introduction that was 8 bars long. Then you would have a verse section that was 8 bars long. And then you would go back to your intro, 8 bars, or maybe you'd half it to 4 bars, then another verse section, into a chorus section of 8 bars. And then you would just repeat that until the end. And maybe the second time around after the chorus, you might have a bridge section. Or maybe after the first chorus, you might have a verse, a bridge, and a chorus. But it all followed the same pattern of 8 bars. Well, when that happened, when all that pulled together, it was like, oh man, why didn't nobody ever explain that to me right at the beginning on how to write a song? How do they do this? Because it's one of the most important aspects. If you are semi-proficient at an instrument, you can start writing your own music, providing you know the format, how it's all done. So, for me, that was always, you know, a big obstacle. So if you're going to be recording and you are into music, you need to know song structure, format. So essentially it's an intro of 8 bars, a verse of 8 bars. Back to the intro, come in with another verse, maybe a pre-chorus of 4 bars, followed by the chorus of 8 bars, and then you just repeat, essentially. And that's all there is to it. Like, it's just that simple. Now, the other aspect is, obviously, how do you go about writing a song? Well, obviously the 1-4-5 chord progression, you know, let's just say C major, 1-4-5, you'd have a C, an F and a G is your fifth, and you return down a C. So that goes back to your scales. C being your root, D is your second, E is your third, F is your fourth, G is your fifth, A minor in this case, and C would be your sixth note, and then B would be your seventh note. And of course, your dominant chords, generally, as you get into music theory, you'll learn what a dominant chord is and how to resolve, or how to actually change keys. But if you use the circle of fifths or the fourths, if you go in reverse, counterclockwise, you see how songs are written. And they actually all do follow similar structure, because your ear wants to move to the next chord. And when something doesn't sound right, it always needs to resolve back to the root somehow, which is what it's all about. So anyways, I just thought I'd talk about basic songwriting, and the first step is song structure, which is your 8-bar, 10-bar, 12-bar intro followed by your verse of a similar nature of bars, whether it's 8, 10, or 12. Intro, again, verse, section, chorus. That's it. That's all there is to it. And it doesn't matter what song. The faster paced songs, you hear that same pattern. It just moves a lot quicker. Or maybe sometimes they chop it up and they'll do a bridge section, which kind of they change, like it sounds like it's a step up. It's to increase your energy level in the song. But that's it. That is essentially it. That's your music that you listen to day in and day out. I wish somebody would have explained that to me back when I was learning how to play guitar. One of the things when I was, once the light bulb went off in grade 11, that's how these songs are being written. I can never piece it together, and then it just kind of went off. The proverbial light bulb. And that's how I started writing my own music and recording it onto, 4 tracks. I'd write it all out on a chart, and I'd be tapping my foot to the metronome. And then I'd go back and I'd listen to it. And then of course you only had 4 tracks to work with. So basically it was 4 mono tracks, an acoustic guitar, maybe a DI bass, and a stereo output, bounce those 2 tracks to, 1 track. And it actually taught you how to mix as well. The sophisticated ones had like 3-band EQ, which was always, interesting. And of course, in those days, when you did recording, you tried to record it as hot as possible. Consumer electronics were typically, I think, minus 10 dBu, whereas professional gear, you could go plus 4 dBu on the meter, saturate the tape. And you would be driving the tape hard at that point. But that's what we did, and looking back, it was so cool being able to do that. I was in grade 11, and I remember writing songs, recording songs, and singing. Didn't have much effects, of course. I think I had a digital delay pedal, which I would use like for everything, put under vocals and have a tap, stereo tap. And that kind of stuff, to me was just like, wow, this is it. But in terms of songwriting, essentially that format of, the intro, the verse, that was it, and the light bulb went off. Anyways, I just thought I'd talk about song structure, which is what essentially we all, want. And if you are going to be doing it, you need to know that, and that is the basis for songwriting. Yeah, next time we'll touch, maybe a little bit of, we'll talk some music and some theory, but that's it. You guys have yourself a great day. If you ever or want to check out what I do, you can go to Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, and I don't really advertise it. I just upload a couple of songs here and there, old stuff, new stuff. I haven't actually done anything there for a while. Let a lot of tracks lapse, but you can go find me on Spotify, David Rollo. I think there's a few people on there, and that's it. So over and out, and we'll talk to you soon. Shalom. Have a beautiful day.